Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, sound to be getting aggressive in the transfer portal over the next couple of days. Want to talk about some of the targets that have emerged for the Oregon Ducks, headlined by former Alabama safety Peyton Woodyard, who was one of my favorite safeties in the 2024 class. He spends the spring with Alabama, hits the transfer portal, going to be a true freshman in 2024. And I think it really highlights one of the bigger misconceptions that a lot of college football fans have about the transfer portal, and that is the portal needs to be used to make your team better immediately heading into next season. You look at how Oregon has used the transfer portal over the last couple of years. A guy like Bo Nix comes in, has a phenomenal year in 2022, but stays in 2023 and has one of the better seasons we saw in all of college football. Guys like Jordan Burch, I think Dante Moore is a perfect example of that as well, in terms of Dante Moore is coming to Oregon knowing that he's probably not going to get a ton of play time in 2024 behind Dillon Gabriel, but he knows that he's going to get developed and be ready to rock and roll in 2025. Peyton Woodyard is kind of a similar situation where, as a true freshman, I don't think he plays a ton for Oregon, but you look at this Oregon team in 2025 after they lose guys like Kobe Savage, Tasheem Johnson, they're going to need some depth in that cornerback room. They're going to need some young talent in that cornerback room. And you look at the perspective of Peyton Woodyard, Aaron Flowers, two guys that are going to be true freshmen in 2024. That is an extremely bright future for the Oregon Ducks in the safety room. Want to talk about Peyton Woodyard, want to talk about some other storylines for this Oregon program in the transfer portal. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Oregon Duck fans, the amount of support y'all have shown, all the Twitter shout outs. That stuff means the absolute world to me. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And furthermore, would love to hear some of your feedback in the comments section. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, let's start with Peyton Woodyard, and then let's talk about where Oregon is going in the transfer portal and largely highlight how Dan Lanning has approached the transfer portal over the last couple of years. Peyton Woodyard, coming from St. John Bosco, one of the things that I like about him that I had in my notes when we covered his commitment to Alabama way back in the summer was, Peyton Woodyard's a 3-year starter at the high school level for one of the best teams across the country in high school in St. John Bosco. And not only the experience and instincts that you see Peyton Woodyard has, I think it's the frame and the athletic profile. This is a safety that you can do a lot of different things with, right? 6'2", almost 200 pounds. You can play him as a box safety. He has the athletic profile, the range, and the frame to play that center field safety as well. That's one of the things that we've highlighted, potentially a question mark for Oregon. Who is going to be that center field free safety? Peyton Woodyard gives you a lot of versatility in how you want to use him as a defensive back, and that largely has been the name of the game in terms of how to play defense in the modern era of college football, giving a lot of different personnel packages, a lot of different looks to opposing offenses. And when you have, kind of for a lack of better terms, a defensive chess piece in Peyton Woodyard who can play man coverage as a nickel, can be kind of that third linebacker as a box safety, and also play that free safety role, you have a lot of versatility in terms of how you want to play your defense. I think what's really exciting for Oregon fans as you take a look at the depth chart is, I think we think Tasheem Johnson, Kobe Savage are probably your two starting safeties going into 2024, but you make no mistake about it, Dan Lanning's not only trying to win a national championship in 2024, he's trying to win a national championship in 2025 and in 2026, and his efforts in the transfer portal are very reflective of that, right? Going out and grabbing Dante Moore, kind of stashing him away for that 2025 class. You look at that safety position and say, hey, what was going to be the solution when Tasheem Johnson and Kobe Savage move on to the NFL after this year? We didn't really have some clear guys to step up. Now you got Aaron Flowers, Peyton Woodyard. I thought Solomon Davis played some really good football during the spring game as well. You suddenly look at the safety room that said, all right, we got some question marks about the depth and what that future of the position looks like. You bring a guy like Peyton Woodyard in and say, we feel a lot better about where we can go as a safety room heading into 2025 with Peyton Woodyard in there. Now, we'll dive deeper into Peyton Woodyard when and if he does commit to the Oregon Ducks. But I want to also highlight just how I think Dan Lanning is doing the transfer portal the right way. And it's no secret that Dan Lanning and Oregon have been one of the more aggressive teams in the transfer portal, and they've brought in a ton of guys that are going to impact this roster in 2024. The difference between what Oregon's doing and then what other programs are doing is Oregon doesn't lose really impact players through the transfer portal. And a lot of the programs like Ole Miss that are very transfer portal heavy, they also lose a lot of very good players in the portal. It's part of the game when you're bringing that many in, you kind of lose some really good players. You look at this Oregon roster, and I think it speaks to the culture and the trust that the players have within this Oregon program that said, hey, if I don't start this year, I stay the course. I trust the coaches in terms of player development. I'm going to get myself on the field and become a very good football player. Now, this is not a shot at the names that we're going to talk about that you see on your screen, but you look at the names that Oregon has lost in the transfer portal, they didn't really lose anybody that was going to be in their two deep or guys that they were going to rely on in 2024. And that is extremely kind of polar opposite to a lot of other programs that use the portal. They also lose a lot of guys that were part of that depth and going to be contributors in 2024. You kind of scroll down this list and say, and again, no shot at any of these guys, but these guys weren't necessarily going to be impact players for the Oregon Ducks. I think outside of Cole Martin, who that one kind of stunks, I thought he was going to be really good. I think it's really impressive that the Oregon Ducks have been able to hang on to all the contributors in their roster while also using the transfer portal as actively as they've been. Now, I want to talk about two other targets for the Oregon Ducks. Now, I want to start with Derek Carman from Michigan State, who obviously has hit the portal again. It doesn't sound like he'll be visiting Oregon, but it's obvious that Oregon went after him quite hard in the winter window. You look at his recruitment, he took a visit to USC. He took a visit to Colorado. He canceled his visit to Miami. Derek Carman makes his team better. There's no doubt about it. And a lot of the Oregon fans who've been rocking with the boys for a little bit now know that, I mean, during the spring, I was kind of banging the table for Oregon to continue to get aggressive on the defensive line, continue to build that depth and grab some difference makers, especially on the inside of that defensive line. And they landed Jamari Caldwell from Houston. I thought that was a massive get. He looked very good in the spring game, but outside of Jamari Caldwell, they didn't go out and get anybody. And I was kind of saying that's surprising to me. And then you watch the spring game, and then you watch a lot of guys on the inside of that defensive line have really strong games, and you say, maybe Dan Lanning knew all along that some of those young guys on the defensive line, the guys like Ben Roberts, they were going to be ready to take that step. And so I was here not watching spring practices, kind of banging the table for, hey, on paper, we need to add a difference maker on that defensive line. Dan Lanning's probably sitting there and saying, hey, I watch spring practice every single day. I know we have difference makers on our defensive line as we speak. And that's probably why you didn't see Dan Lanning go after any defensive lineman, because he knew that's not a position where we need to go out and be very aggressive in, because we got our players heading into 2024. Now, I still would love Derek Carman to come to Oregon. I think Derek Carman is probably the best defensive lineman in the portal right now. I think he's a guy that can be that nose. I think he can take on double teams, be very good against the run, but also can be a difference maker in terms of penetration, creating those negative plays. You don't see many guys that are 6'5", 320 move and have the athleticism that Derek Carman does. I'm a Michigan fan. I've seen it for the last 2 years against Miami. Michigan's offensive line hasn't had many problems with Big Ten opponents. I'll say this, Derek Carman gave some Michigan offensive linemen some problems over the last 2 years. I would love to see Derek Carman become an Oregon Duck. We'll see kind of how that plays out. The other name that I've heard a lot of buzz on, I think this is a little bit more message boards than anything real, is Zakari Franklin. Obviously, the connection with Will Stein back at UTSA. And I'd say this is one that I probably wouldn't necessarily endorse. And it goes back to the conversation of Dan Lanning using the transfer portal the right way and bringing in guys that this Oregon team needs. We're not just going randomly to the portal and grabbing good players. Like, yeah, we want to make our roster better, but we want to be methodical about it. You look at this wide receiver, Zakari Franklin, he's got 1 year of eligibility left, and he's not playing above Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden. I'd even argue that. I mean, guys like Gary Bryant or Kyle Casper, I don't know if Zakari Franklin, is going to get a ton of play time. And if he's got 1 year of eligibility left, does that really make a ton of sense. And then you look at, hey, we want to continue to develop guys like Jurion Dickey or a guy like Ryan Pelham, who's a true freshman. I don't know if this one would make a lot of sense. I think this Oregon wide receiver room is really, really good heading into 2024. Zakari Franklin's not a guy that's going to be on the team any longer than until December. I would probably shy away. It's not me saying Zakari Franklin's not a good football player. It's more me just highlighting that this Oregon wide receiver room is really, really darn good. And I don't think you can add a wide receiver that makes it better. At least Zakari Franklin, in my mind, is not a wide receiver that makes this team better heading into 2024. We'll see how it plays out. Peyton Woodyard, again, if and when he commits, we'll take a deeper dive into Peyton Woodyard, talk about what he brings to this Oregon Ducks program. We'll obviously keep you guys updated. The Oregon fans, again, appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.